Present.
Dr. Maggie Bockel,
Present.
Councillor John Cox,
Present.
Councillor Isabel Davidson,
Present.
Councillor Sandra MacDonald,
Present.
Councillor Glenn Reid,
Present.
Mr. Colin Alanak,
Here.
Mr. Jerry Donald, I can see him on screen. Are we happy? We're happy with that. Okay. We've also got a couple of apologies for today, members. So we've got apologies from our chair, John Crawley, and Councillor Hutchison is stepping in as chair for today. We've also got apologies from Mr. Alan Wood and Ewan Wallace. Is there any other apologies to be recorded? Nothing. Okay, I'll hand over to our chairperson for today.
Thank you very much. So going through the agenda, item 1 is housekeeping. Do we have any declarations of interest or transparency statements at all? And moving on, we've now got the minute of the board meeting from our last board meeting on 26th of October 2022. Are there any questions on that, or are we minded to approve that? Agreed. Agreed. We now move on to item. Actually, at this point, I'll make a slight change to the agenda. We're moving on to item 2 just now, which is a presentation by Robert Andrew, the chair of the North East Bus Alliance. I plan to adjust the agenda after that, so that after this presentation, we'll discuss the Aberdeen Rapid Transit update and then the bus action plan update, following those items, and then we'll return to the agenda otherwise after that, if people are happy with that. And on that note, I'll pass on over to Robert Andrew to give his presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to join you all this afternoon. I feel a bit in the lion's den here, given I've got this side of the chamber to myself, but please bear with me. I'm not working the slides, so I'll try and do my best to to signal to go when I want to move the slides on. Okay, so if we can move on to the next one, what I'm going to run through this afternoon is a brief introduction explaining how I've ended up chairing the Bus Alliance. I'll look at some of the challenges that are facing the bus sector at present, then move on to opportunities, because there are a lot currently. A few words on the Bus Alliance, which I know many of you will be very, very familiar with, and then just close with a discussion on the bus partnership. So if we can move on, please. Okay, so a few words about myself. I took over as chair of the Bus Alliance around about 2 years ago. That followed me retiring from full-time employment with Stagecoach in summer 2020. 35 years in the bus industry, 28 of those with Stagecoach, and for quite a number of those years I was managing director of the Scottish operation. I've been involved in bus services in the North East since 1995, other than for 8 years when I was kicked south of the border, but they let me back, which was good. I remain in the industry on a part-time basis as director of Scottish Citylink, who run long-distance coach services across Scotland. Just for information, I'm a non-councillor member of the Nestrans Board and also chair the Highland Bus Service Improvement Partnership Steering Group, and I'm the operator nominee on the Bus Appeals Tribunal for Scotland. So very much keep my hand in with transport-related matters. Move on, please. Yeah. So I'll touch firstly on some of the challenges facing the bus sector at present. You'll all know from local media coverage that there's quite a major driver shortage across the UK at present. Around about 10 to 15% typically, and all operators are facing that regardless of size and regardless of geography. I think the North East has perhaps not been quite as bad as some other areas. A number of reasons for that. There was a training holiday effectively during the pandemic, which resulted in 6 months of recruitment activity not being able to take place for, due to the restrictions that were in place at that time. As other sectors have seen, some staff chose to leave the labour market altogether following the pandemic. There's been a loss or a reduction in the volume of migrant workers available to the sector. And really the industry is facing the same challenge as a lot of shift-based industries are facing, recruiting and retaining staff. Punctuality and reliability is really key to a quality bus operation. Surveys consistently highlight those elements as being what customers want most. They want consistency of journey time. They want the knowledge that the bus will turn up at where they're waiting for it on time. And congestion can be a major barrier to operators being able to achieve that, and hence some of the work of the Bus Alliance and the Bus Partnership Fund submissions. Next one, please. The backdrop to everything that all public transport operators do is the fact that transport's a derived demand. People generally don't travel because they want to travel. They travel because they're doing something else, and travel is a means of being able to access that activity. Patronage has been in decline for many, many years. In my opinion, it's not a symptom of the ownership of bus companies or the regulatory regime under which the industry operates. The same challenges would exist regardless of who owns the businesses and how they're regulated. And they very much predate the privatisation and deregulation process, which I'm old enough to remember. The pandemic accelerated the decline. There was a lot of negative messaging regarding sort of public transport at that time. It was seen very much as being an enclosed area, and therefore people were at higher risk of catching the virus. And that's still impacting the volume of particularly senior citizens who are using bus services. The number of over 60 concessions is typically around about 60 to 65% of where it was prior to the pandemic, and that's a significant number of trips not being made. However, there are some positive messages as well. In the recovery of buses outperforming the recovery of rail services across the UK, there's some very promising figures for under 60s travel and the level that's taking place. Both operators in this area, I know, have indicated that their non-senior concessionary patronage is now higher than it was in 2019, which is very, very encouraging, and it's outperforming Scotland and the rest of the UK. So there's certainly a lot of encouragement there as to where things may be heading. Can we move on, please? Other challenges, there's been a long debate in this area regarding access to Union Street. I understand the difficulties that the City Council and councillors faced in coming to that decision. I'm pleased that the decision's now been taken and we can move on from that. And I think the key issue is ensuring that the diversionary routes that bus services are using actually do work well in terms of the bus journey time, the bus access through the streets in question, and vitally important that infrastructure for bus users is very good in the streets that are now being served or will be being served. Government funding, and credit to government that they did assist the industry throughout the pandemic and in the aftermath of the worst of it. The current funding that's in place expires on the 31st of March. There's a lot of work going on to make sure there's not a cliff edge at that point in terms of fare levels and service levels. And the patronage recovery, hopefully means that won't be the case. Other funding streams are inevitably under pressure. The main ones that come from government are concessionary fare revenue and what's called Network Support Grant, which, for those of you who have been involved in transport for a number of years, that replaced Bus Service Operators Grant, which is effectively a rebate in some of the fuel costs incurred. But those funding streams have seen real term reductions, which adds to the pressure on the industry and does risk the fact that fare increases are higher than they'd otherwise be, or there's greater volume of service cuts than would otherwise be. Everybody's getting hit with fuel prices and general inflation costs, and they've hit the sector hard, as you'd imagine. Local authority budgets, remain under severe pressure, and I know there've been particular challenges, for rural authorities in terms of maintaining the supported service network, and there have been some cuts to tender services. Initiatives like Ready to Go will become increasingly important in terms of providing residents with access to public transport so they can get to the local amenities, but they're notoriously expensive. So I recognise fully the challenges that are on local authority partners at this time. Being positive, though, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Being positive, there are a lot of opportunities. Net zero and climate change, modal shift towards active travel and all public transport means it will be very positive impacts in terms of achieving net zero and climate change objectives. And the more people travelling around brings economic benefits, and the more people travelling through sustainable modes brings health and well-being. Remember, every bus journey includes at least one walk to or from the bus stop, often many more than that. In my opinion, the North East is ahead of the game and is in a very good place with the work of the Bus Alliance, the Bus Action Plan, the Bus Partnership Fund, and the positive input from the authorities in Nestrans, with the opportunity to make a real difference to how people move about the area and increase the mode split for both public transport and for active travel. We move on, please. But by early next year, there'll be 70 zero-emission buses running in and around Aberdeen. Apologies if anybody's in the left-hand slide. I can't see from here who's in it, but if anybody's in that photograph, I apologise for using it. But the vehicle on the left is one of the electric vehicles that are now operating on the airport service and around Aberdeen and West Hill with Stagecoach. And the vehicle on the right is one of the latest generation hydrogen vehicles in service with First. And by the time the vehicles that are committed to the area enter service, of the 4 major cities in Scotland, Aberdeen will have the greatest proportion of services and mileage being operated by zero-emission vehicles. Again, reinforcing the fact that we're in a very good place to move forward. Next one, please. Commented earlier on the strength of commercial patronage, and that can be built on, and that then gives greater sustainability to the network across the area. Early in 2022, a new under-22 concessionary fare scheme was introduced, and that's really a great opportunity for us all to capture younger people, capture in inverted commas, but capture younger people as public transport users, and hopefully have them very much in the mindset that it works for them and they'll continue using it when they're no longer, or when they exceed 22 years of age. Take-up was low initially. I know there have been some debates about the level of take-up, but it's now rising steadily. And it's been good that it's now government feels able to actually promote the scheme and increase the awareness and increase the take-up. And that's a critical building block for users moving forward. And ticketing has moved on significantly as well. We've got contactless technology, and that's been a game changer. It makes it very easy for people to board vehicles and make their journey. First have been rolling out what they call tap and cap, which effectively is giving best value for journeys within the First network. And operators are working collaboratively to create multi-operator versions of that, so that if you use a First journey for to travel to work and a Stagecoach bus to travel home, then effectively, potentially, it could cap out at the multi-operator fare, so that people are automatically getting best value for their journey rather than paying more than they feel may be appropriate. And that hopefully will come on stream, the next year or so and make it really, really easy for people to use public transport. Moving on to the Bus Alliance, it's very much at the forefront of partnership activity in Scotland. It was signed in August 2018. It replaced a previous partnership agreement that had been in place for 10 to 15 years. You can see the membership on the slide. It's both local authorities, Nestrans, the 2 major operators in the area, a representative of smaller operators, and a representative of Bus Users Scotland. And it's very important that bus users have a voice in that forum. And it's great that Greg Mackay, the director of Bus Users Scotland, is on the group. The alliance is very much seen by Transport Scotland as an example that other areas should replicate, and guidance is being drawn up by Transport Scotland, which will then shape the future direction of bus service improvement partnerships. And the Alliance Board has been discussing how they can very much influence that, so that lessons from Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire get taken on board across Scotland. So the objectives of the Bus Alliance, they're on the screen there just now. The overarching ones are to arrest decline in bus patronage in North East Scotland, and then to achieve year-on-year growth in bus patronage, and a number of sub-objectives which are on the slide. These need to be seen against the backdrop of the societal and economic changes that have impacted on public transport usage, as we discussed earlier. Some of the challenges that have been faced. It comes down to, if somebody doesn't have a reason to travel, they won't make that bus journey, or they won't make that rail journey. And we've seen factors like home working, online shopping, some criticism of high street offerings, and that they're all having impacts on public transport usage. However, customer satisfaction, it's measured regularly by Transport Focus, and user satisfaction is consistently high. The challenge for all of us in the Alliance is how we get that message across to non-users and influence their activity and get them to try out the network that's in the area. Because growing bus usage is critical if the government's climate change objectives and car use reduction targets are going to be met. Next one, please. So the Bus Alliance has worked hard over the last 4 years and the predecessor partnership. Some of the key things that you'll probably be aware of are the Grasshopper multi-operator smart ticketing system, which is very much at the forefront of smart ticketing in Scotland. The State of the Nation report was a very important piece of work, which is fed into the Bus Partnership Fund bids that have been made on behalf of the area, and the work that's ongoing to try and capture future funding for Aberdeen and Shire. And the Bus Action Plan, I know you've got a paper being taken on that later in the meeting. All I'd highlight is that there's actually a very long list of initiatives that are underway by the various partners. So there's an awful lot of activity going on. Next one, please. So the Bus Partnership Fund itself, it's a 500 million capital fund from Scottish Government. It's really the first time there's been significant investment by government in trying to improve bus journey times and the performance of bus services within Scotland. It's multi-year funding. Authorities have been invited to bid for that, and the initial tranche of funding was awarded for quick wins and preparatory work for future schemes. And the objectives of the Bus Partnership Fund, which you can see in the screen there, are very much aligned to the objectives of the Bus Alliance. Aberdeen City Council bid for just over £12 million on behalf of the partnership. The bid was supported by all the partners, and Scottish Government awarded the full funding sought, and it's the largest award that was made in the first round of funding. So the funds were, a significant proportion of it was for enabling works in South College Street, and I had a look at that earlier when I got into the city today, and it's well underway. Looking forward, 1.4 million for what's called stag appraisals and the outlined business case process relating to the city centre, and 4 corridors, Ellen to Garthy, Westhill to Aberdeen, Inverurie to Aberdeen, and Stonehaven to Aberdeen, along with Aberdeen Rapid Transit, which I know you'll be touching on shortly in the meeting. And really that 1.4 million is so that very strong business cases can be put to government to secure future rounds of funding for the Aberdeen area, which will then enable ART to progress, enable significant journey time improvements on the corridors. Next one, please. And the BPF, it very much interacts with other projects, Union Street and the City Centre Bus Master Plan, the Beach Master Plan, the Low Emission Zone, which is now in place in effectively sort of shadow period until the penalties start to take effect in 2024. Grasshopper ticketing, which we've mentioned, and hopefully continued development of Park and Ride. And Ellen's a very good example of where Park and Ride can work well. So I'd stress that there's significant benefits for Shire residents as well as city residents. And to close with a couple of comments on Aberdeen Rapid Transit. The vision's on the slide. It's designed to really make a step change in public transport provision within the city. If we can move to the next one, please. To me, it needs to be seen as a package. The vehicle, I know many of you have probably were on the trip to Belfast a few weeks ago, and the vehicles are obviously something that's different, and that gives a visual impression of what's happened in Belfast. But I think we need to remember that ART has to be seen as a package. Vehicles are one element of that. And technology in terms of vehicle design is moving very, very quickly. And I know that, sort of everybody wants to keep a very open mind to get the right solution for the city based on what's available at the time. But it needs to deliver bus priorities. I mentioned earlier, passengers really want reduced journey times and consistent journey times so they get punctuality and reliability when they're travelling. Infrastructure is key. The waiting environment when you're at the bus stop is key, and also in some areas safe routes to and from the stops. Ticketing, and that's moved so quickly over the last couple of years and will continue to move very, very quickly in terms of, when we went into the pandemic, Citylink, the business I'm still involved in, the on-vehicle transactions were probably about 60–70% cash. Now we're lucky if it's 5 or 10% cash, just because people have naturally moved on to contactless. The whole customer proposition needs to be right and be attractive, so that it's a seamless journey and delivers the standard of service that customers rightly expect in today's world. So to sum up, ART is a very, very good initiative. I really hope it captures the imagination of the city as a whole and secures funding so that in the coming years it can be rolled out as a successful venture across the area. So that's been a whistle-stop tour across what's going on in the bus sector in the northeast currently. Hopefully it's been helpful, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that anybody may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It was very interesting, and it was good to get that overview of everything that the partnership, the alliance is doing. Do we have any questions from members? I'm just trying to see on the screen if there's any hands, or from Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for which was a really good, I think, not just a summary, but I think a really good sell for what we in Nestrans are trying to do with helping the bus journey that we're going to have to do if we're going to make that step change, as you mentioned. Can I ask what you think just in terms of perhaps the shorter term, short to medium term, rather than the long term? What would the Bus Alliance see as being real enablers to make this the longer term vision happen, which we obviously need to change the way we travel? Thank you. Okay,
thank you for the feedback. You're never sure when you're sitting in a room like this just whether you're hitting the mark or not. So thank you for that, Councillor MacDonald. I think the alliance and the various work streams that the alliance is involved in, really the focus is on trying to move as quickly as possible with the work streams where the stag appraisals are taking place to try and capture funding from Transport Scotland as early as possible. It's always quite a tortuous process, as I know you'll all be aware, trying to actually get to the point where funding can be awarded, and credit to the work that was done to secure the 12 million in the first round. But the 4 corridors plus the city centre and the ART, getting those over the line in terms of getting through the gateway process, getting outline business cases complete, being able then to go for funding to actually start to do the improvements on the corridors has to be the real focus. It's probably fair to say that there's because Union Street was quite a difficult issue in the area, there's probably been a bit of distraction surrounding that, and I really don't mean to sound critical of the City Council in any way on that. I know how difficult that was to be worked through. But and now that that's done, I think then the focus can be on just are there quick wins anywhere? The corridor studies will inevitably pick up where those are. I think it'll be challenging, just in terms of road spaces is finite, and how you use that road space is key. But from a bus user's perspective, what you don't want is for only the easy bits to be done, and then you get stuck in congestion over part of the corridor. I think what will happen, because the corridor studies are multimodal, we'll hopefully find solutions that result in motorists seeing the vehicle, the bus passing them, having a quicker journey, because that's the most compelling way of persuading motorists that they've got a choice and there's a better way to make their daily journey. So really, I think the short term has to be getting through the business case process and trying to capture that funding, recognising that these schemes inevitably will take quite a bit of time to deliver. Any quick wins that can be delivered along the way in terms of infrastructure or signal adjustments, I know that both local authorities will be very alert to those and doing everything they can.
See a hand from Colin Alanak online.
Hi, yeah, thanks very much for that. It was, like I say, an interesting overview of what's happening, and great to see that the bus thing's moving on. You mentioned about Union Street, and you will be aware that there's still a lot of concerns about the safety of more vulnerable users on Union Street with the bus corridor coming into place. Are there any specific actions that the Bus Alliance and the bus operators, etc., are doing to alleviate those concerns?
I know that any time that there's a change to road layout or how a street works, then one of the key things that takes place is dialogue between the roads authority, in which this case would be the city council, and operators, just in terms of how that space can work as efficiently and as particularly safely as possible. I'm not aware of any particular causes of concern, but you need to bear with me. I'm not an Aberdeen resident, so I don't necessarily see sort of local media coverage on that. But I know that there'll have been dialogue, directly with the operators who are using the street in question, rather than sort of necessarily coming through the alliance itself.
Scott, do you have a follow up there at all? As the hand up as our legacy?
Sorry, just a legacy. Too slow getting it back down again.
See Jerry Donald, do you want to come in?
Thank you, and firstly, thanks very much indeed for a very informative presentation. I thought it was very good. Daft laddie question perhaps, but is there such a thing as a magic bullet to get the public back on to using public transport? If so, what do you believe the single most important factor is? And the second question is just how many members are there in the Bus Alliance, and how aligned are they with the objectives of the Bus Alliance? Thank you.
I wish there was a magic bullet, as in, sort of everywhere there's challenges in society, it always takes time to work through and find the right solutions to it. I think operators need to work very hard on the driver situation, so that they can get back to having, if not a full complement of staff, but certainly sufficient staff that it's not impacting on the daily reliability of services. Customer confidence is key. And if the industry can achieve that, then there's no reason why it can't go from strength to strength. And bear in mind that the numbers in this area currently for non-senior citizen concessionary passengers are actually very, very good. I think working together on just how you get that punctuality and reliability right goes a long way to increasing customer confidence. There's a lot of time and effort goes into training of drivers, so that the silly things that can fill up councillors' mailbags on occasion don't happen, if at all possible, because you're only as good as your poorest member of staff when it comes to public perception in many cases. So I think it's in an more encouraging place than if I'd spoken at this meeting 2 or 3 months ago. So I think there is optimism now for the future. In terms of the alliance itself, the two major bus operators both sit on the alliance. The two local authorities sit on the alliance through senior officials. Nestrans effectively are on the alliance, but also support the alliance. There's a representative of smaller operators and a representative of bus users, and collectively they've somehow landed with me trying to chair them. But it's a very good group, and I certainly can. I've been very impressed. I hear about, I'm involved in partnership activities in the Highland area, and I hear some of the difficulties other partnerships are facing elsewhere in Scotland at this time. And I say that the work of Nestrans, Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire really is a shining light for how things can operate in Scotland. And the partners, whilst they will on occasions have challenges and issues where they might not be totally aligned on occasions, they all see the bigger picture. They all want to work together, and they're all
it's back. Do you want to just maybe repeat the last 10 seconds of your answer there, just since the connection drops?
Yeah. I'd like to give reassurance that whilst on occasions there might be areas where the partners don't always see things in exactly the same way, everybody signed up to objectives. Everybody signed up to the same sort of bigger picture thinking to take the bus service provision in this area forward.
I think I'm not seeing any more hands, mostly online, and not a huge amount of us in the chamber. Thank you very much again. Our next couple of items will be discussing well, Aberdeen Rapid Transit and then talk about the bus action plan if you wish to stay for that at all, and if you wish to contribute to any of that, you're more than welcome. But thank you very much for your time and for your presentation, and we'll now move on to item 5.2, the Aberdeen Rapid Transit update. Kirsty Chalmers, can I get an update?
Thank you very much. Yeah, this paper really is just an update on Aberdeen Rapid Transit and the key activities that have happened over the last couple of months since the last meeting. It predominantly focus on the engagement activities. We had a councillor briefing back on the 31st of October, which for all local councillors across the North East, this was really well attended. We had about 70 councillors from across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire with a really good range of questions and discussion. There was a presentation around about what the vision is for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, bus partnership funding, an overview of the developing proposals, and a sort of looking ahead over the next few months. The aim really was to sort of brief members. Obviously, a lot of the Nestrans Board members would have been well aware of the proposals and the vision for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, but really to sort of brief other members in advance of a more public campaign launch on what that vision is. We've also done quite a lot of work in other stakeholder engagement with meetings with the Chamber of Commerce, SCDI, Opportunity North East and Aberdeen Inspired, briefing them on what Aberdeen Rapid Transit is and what that vision is. Following the meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, we also identified an opportunity to put an article in the Chamber Business Bulletin. The theme for this edition is positive change, so that fit really well. And there is currently, that edition was launched at the beginning of December and has a double-page spread on Aberdeen Rapid Transit within that. And there's a link to that business bulletin within the report. This was all leading up to the campaign launch, which happened on the Thursday, the 24th of November. That really involved a news release and media briefings in advance of that. The launch was the launch of the campaign for Aberdeen Rapid Transit to get that into the public domain, a bit more discussion and debate on it. We updated the website. That's got more detail on the project and some background documents. And we had some really good press and media coverage of that. Across a whole range of media outlets. I think really positive coverage. There was even an online poll in the Press and Journal asking the question, do you think ART will improve transport in the city? At the time of writing, it was just over 50% in favour. I think it closed around about that sort of 53% in favour. And with comments around about, being one of the sort of closest run polls they've had in a while. So I think really positive that was so high profile. We also had supportive comments from the Chamber of Commerce, Aberdeen Inspired and Campaign for North East Rail, which just helped to boost the profile of that launch. As I say, the website pages were updated. There is an opportunity within that for those who wish to be kept up to date to sign up for future feedback. We've had some success with that so far, and we are currently monitoring all sort of media coverage on a weekly basis just to keep an eye on the comments that are being made, because obviously there's quite a lot through social media as well. And we've got a number of social media posts programmed in up until the end of the year, and continuing to work with Jacobs on programme for engagement and communications beyond this, but a really positive start, I think. The work on the options appraisal is continuing. There's just a brief update on that within the report, but I think the other main thing to highlight was the study visit to Belfast, which happened on the 21st and 22nd of November. The delegation of officers and board members who visited Belfast. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go, so others might want to comment more on that. But I think it was a really positive, 2 days. With presentations from the Department for Infrastructure on the glider service and an opportunity to travel on it and to see the depots. And we're continuing to keep in touch with the team in Belfast. Actually, we've had a few follow-up questions with them and they've been really helpful. So the recommendation of the report really is just to note those updates and we will bring back for future meetings as we progress. Thank you.
I'll chip in with my own question. I'll bring in Councillor Davidson in a second. It was just on that the Press and Journal poll where there's somewhat maybe split public opinion. Are there any ideas and what are the kind of plans in Eldora to try and build up public perception of what this project is and how it can deliver for the city and for the Shire?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the campaign launch, we see that very much as the start of an ongoing engagement communications campaign. As I say, we've got some funding through the Bus Partnership Fund to dedicate towards that, really aimed at trying to encourage engagement as we move through the appraisal and the business case development process, and so that when we come forward with proposals for consultation, people have an understanding of what that is and are keen to engage. So we're working with Jacobs at the moment as I say, we've focused on this short term up until the launch. We've got media posts coming out up until the end of the year, but now focusing on how we continue that, keep that momentum going just throughout the project, really, as we carry on.
Thank you very much for that, and I'll bring in Councillor Davidson now.
Thanks very much. And I've had snippets about the Belfast trip, but it would be really interesting to get, lessons learned. What are the top tips from the Belfast trip? And is there any report or is there anything, a recording of in some way of the information given during that study tour?
If I could come in on that, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Yes, we gathered quite a lot of information from that trip in terms of PowerPoint presentations and some of the details around how the operation of that system works. I briefly summarised it into 3 paragraphs within the report, but certainly if there's an appetite from members, I could perhaps, through the members part of our website, put on the PowerPoint presentations and maybe a little summary of some of the key lessons learned. I mean, certainly in terms of the efficiency of the network, how effective it is in getting people on and off the vehicles through an off-ticketing scheme was one of the key findings. The pricing, I think, surprised a lot of the delegation in that it is relatively inexpensive, and that's something we would certainly be aspiring towards. And I guess the third key learning for me was just how popular it is in terms of the number of people who are using it, a lot of whom who have transferred from car, and particularly through the park and ride opportunities that are there. We also managed to get from Belfast colleagues indicative costs on the vehicles, the infrastructure, the halts, etc. And we're using that information to try and pull together a high level costing of what a scheme in Aberdeen area might look like. So that's the area we're at the moment. We're coming back hopefully in the spring with a much more detailed report on the proposals for an Aberdeen Rapid Transit, having our consultants concluded the outline business case that they're currently working on, and we can bring forward some more information in detail at that time.
That's great. Thanks very much. It was obviously quite a beneficial trip then.
Councillor Bow, not Councillor, Maggie Bow, apologies.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, one of the key things that came out of it for me was, I think, as Robert pointed out, is that it is a package. It's not just about the buses, but it's also not just about the rapid transit system itself. It's how that integrates with other parts of the bus network, existing parts of the bus network, and importantly for me, being a planner, also how that interacts with things like the urban realm and regeneration of the areas in which it passes. So it is seeing it as a bigger picture. So I think that was a really valuable lesson. And even things like, how your depot operates, because I kind of thought, not sure why I want to go and see a depot, but when I was there, actually, it was very clear why you'd want to know what kind of infrastructure you need to support the buses, the vehicles, not buses.
I'll just bring in David Dunn here.
Thank you, Chair. I think just going back to your earlier question about buy-in and getting people sort of to sort of accept it, I think Dr. Buckle's point about it being an entire package is really important. But I think the other thing that really came across to me was almost the difference between the first line that was put in Belfast, which obviously had concern, as you would expect when changes are made and sort of bus lanes are put in. But then the sort of reception a second line got, which was almost, well, we wanted more, no, we wanted more. There was definitely a palpable sense of, you know, almost trying to split the community up into, well, you know, who wants the corridor more, and to see that change in a relatively short period of time. It's only 3-4 years since the first route went in, I think was very exciting. So, but I do take the point, you know, for all of us in the room, this is a new proposal. It's a new project. I'm conscious for the vast majority of the population out there, they probably don't know anything about it. So we really do need to sell it and sell the big benefits, because I think, again, as Dr. Bockel pointed out, in terms of the urban realm and the regeneration, there are huge opportunities far beyond the transport system itself, but what the transport system can do for communities. So that's something that I think we really need to get across.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. I think it really was very worthwhile going over to Belfast and seeing it in situ. Following on from that, I think it was how well connected that initial route was with the east and west of Belfast. I think, you know, the politics of all that was really interesting. It was good to be able to speak on the bus to users, and I took the opportunity to speak to school kids, and the park and ride speaking to people were there as well. And, you know, there was a little chat sometimes about maybe not enough seats and so on, but you really got the sense that the glider in Belfast had made a real difference to communities and had got people out of cars and into the buses. What struck me as well was how integrated it was in terms of the information that was on boards that you could see, and how frequently the journeys were. So, you know, you knew you could rock up at a halt, as they called it, rather than the bus stop, and there would be another one within, you know, 7 to 9 minutes, and there they, you know, you could see when they were coming, and even when you were on that vehicle, the map that you had in front of you was telling you very quickly, you know, or you could see where you were going to get off, and the sort of markers that they had as designers was around the sort of 400-meter walking to. So I think they were looking at how you got to the bus stops as well. We learned an awful lot about how it worked, both from you know, the department. The only thing that I thought we might have done that we didn't do, and we didn't have time for, was maybe to speak to some of the local politicians there about how they handled it, and but certainly speaking to the civil servants and to the operators when we were on the way out to the park and ride site, it was apparent to us, I think, that that it had really worked. And as Mr. Dunn said, there was a real appetite for another. So I think smaller acorns in Aberdeen will grow, and hopefully in not too distant future, more and more people will know and understand what the step change could and should be here in the city. So yeah, a good trip, and a pint in the pub at the end of the day, speaking to people there about it was very helpful as well. And it was Guinness, you're right.
I'll bring in Jerry Donalds.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is one of the most exciting projects that the cities and the Shire has seen for a number of years, and it's really, really important that we get it right. I'm not sure, as a member of Nestrans, I know enough about it in terms of what the real benefits that there are to it, and I just wonder whether indeed there's any potential to, as Councillor Davidson I think was alluding to, sharing that learning from the trip a bit more, in a way that we can all get fully on board, if you excuse the pun, with the project. And the main question I've got is what do we do next in terms of getting the public on board, and perhaps indeed with the major employers in the area?
Thanks, Chair, if I may. Yes, as Kirsty's mentioned, we have got consultants supporting us both on the technical aspects of getting more information about what the scheme might look like and making sure that we get properly prepared before the point at which we need to make a bid to the Scottish Government for funding for the implementation. We've also got a consultant on board advising us on marketing and comms. And certainly one of the things that they want us to speak about is around engaging with businesses. We mentioned Chamber of Commerce and one or two other key players like Aberdeen Inspired, but what we haven't quite got down to is actually thinking, how would it benefit businesses that might be on or around the corridors? So I think there's a little bit of work to be done between now and the spring. And that's certainly something that's on our agenda. But yeah, definitely the opportunity to bring back more detailed reports to this board and make sure that that information is shared as widely as we can to businesses, to the general public, to the media, etc., within the area.
I'll bring in David Dunn again as well.
Thanks, Chair. Just one final point on this before we move off it, because I think it is also worth highlighting. Bettina Seisland, who's the director of Transport Scotland for bus accessibility and active travel, also visited us about a week ago now to discuss a range of matters. It wasn't just on ART, but ART did take up a sizable portion of the conversation. I think Transport Scotland are very excited about this project as well. It has been included in STPR2, or at least in the draft that we've seen. It's also been referenced in the National Planning Framework 4, which is due to go to Parliament in the coming weeks. So I think there is a sort of ambition at Transport Scotland to see if this could be a solution, particularly I'm going to say for perhaps some of the smaller cities where, you know, larger transport systems like rail or trams are probably not suitable. But equally, I could see this being a sort of a complementary system within, for example, Edinburgh or Glasgow. So we are certainly far ahead of the rest of the bus partnership funds across Scotland. So hopefully there will support will continue. And as I say, the questions that they've come back with have been very encouraging about progress over the coming years. So we will be feeding back, and as I say, happy to keep the board updated on progress in that regard.
I'm not seeing any more hands, and I'll just echo all of the positive comments. It was a very worthwhile trip, and seeing how everything in Belfast actually worked together and seeing the positive reception it got. From a politician point of view, it's obviously there was this difficult decisions they had to make in the run up to that made it viable, but it's for them it's paid off, and hopefully that will be hopefully we'll get to the same stage of having a system that works and delivers for folk in Aberdeen and for Aberdeenshire as well. I'll move on now to 6.1, the bus action plan update, and I'll pass back over to Kirsty Chalmers.
Thank you. Yeah, this report really provides the board with an updated version of the North East Bus Alliance Bus Action Plan. I won't go through the detail, the background of that too much, because I know Robert's obviously covered the objectives and the purpose of the Bus Alliance as part of his presentation, which is, thank you for that. But the first bus action plan underneath the Bus Alliance was published in 2020 and was informed by the findings of quite a comprehensive state of the network report. It sets out the priority actions of the Bus Alliance partners, and it's really a rolling programme of actions that we update on a regular basis. But just to emphasise as well, I suppose that the purpose of the action plan is to bring together. It's a partnership plan, so it brings together the actions that we can deliver, that we want to take forward as an alliance, as partners. Obviously, all the partners will have their own individual actions relating to their statutory obligations in terms of bus provision or commercial considerations. But the action plan for the alliance really tries to bring together what can we deliver and what improvements can we take forward in partnership. So we felt that the time was right to do a further update of it in 2022, and a revised action plan has been produced. It follows very much the same structure as previous ones, and very much the same actions, but brings in some new actions and some further updates under each of its priority areas. There's a summary of the action plan in Appendix A, but there is a full version available on the Nestrans website, which provides more detail under each action of the progress against each one. But just to summarise some of the key things that are in here, we have a number of actions under journey times and reliability, very much focused on the bus partnership, on the priority corridors, including the work of the bus partnership fund through all the multimodal corridor studies, including the A93, including the A947 and the city centre, but also about identifying other parts of the non-strategic network where there might be pinch points and ongoing monitoring and review of that to see whether improvements can be made. We have a range of actions under information, marketing and promotion. There's an awful lot in here there's quite a lot of work piloting digital bus timetable information, real-time information. There's a large number of actions being taken forward in relation to that. We also are looking at targeting campaigns to encourage increased bus patronage and engagements with the business communities, which various partners are doing on an ongoing basis. Fares and ticketing is very much focused on the further development of the Grasshopper ticketing product, which is very much a partnership initiative, and the expansion of contactless and smart ticketing is really the focus of the actions. The actions there. Obviously, we've seen a large expansion of tap and cap ticketing, but that's not across the region as yet, and we would like that to be the case. Affordability and accessibility. We include actions within this under community transport. The Inverurie Ready to Go service. The pilot of that is one of the key actions within that, and really just trying to make sure that the public are getting the best value tickets that are available, making sure that the information is out there to promote things like the under 22 concessionary scheme, and making sure that the information is out there. And I think this links back to promotional campaigns, just making sure that people are aware and are getting the best value available to them. We have a number of actions under interchange, focused on improvements to park and ride, focused on enhancing the network of mini interchange hubs across Aberdeenshire, and also improvements to the region's key bus stations. Also looking at bus stop infrastructure, and just trying to make sure that the standard of bus stop infrastructure is improving generally across the northeast. There's a significant inventory of bus stops across the region, so it's just really trying to sort of continually improve that, working with the councils, and also linking into the project, to the Aberdeen Rapid Transit project, making sure that what we're wanting to deliver through ART is reflected within the bus action plan. And as I say, as that project progresses, we'll see the action plan evolve with that. Quality of the fleet, very much focused on low emission vehicles and enhancing the quality of the vehicles. The operators are obviously doing quite a lot in relation to that, in partnership, with funding from Scottish Government, and that includes the hydrogen buses and the electric buses we've seen. And then we also have at the bottom there a range of actions relating to managing demand. These are not specifically bus action plan actions, but we've pulled them into the bus action plan from the likes of the regional transport strategy. These are all actions, or many of the actions there are also in the regional transport strategy, but we've pulled them into the bus action plan really to reflect the importance that they have on attracting people, making bus an attractive option, making bus an efficient option. So really that there are actions in there relating to the city centre master plan, to the low emission zone, and also how we look, as we go forward, how we look at how our parking policies and such like impact on the success of our park and rides, the success and bus patronage. So that's a really brief summary. As I say, there's a full version on the website that gives more detail on the progress that's being made against each of those actions. And as I say, we continue to review it on an annual basis. and update it and keep it up to date. The other function really of this is part of the bus partnership fund as a requirement. Although there's no match funding requirement as part of the bus partnership fund funding, there is a requirement for us to demonstrate matching kind contributions. And so this update to the bus action plan has been submitted to Transport Scotland as part of that demonstration of the wide range of actions that are being delivered by the Alliance to support that. This will proceed. There will be a further requirement as the bus partnership fund and ART develop to move into bus service improvement partnerships, which are a more formal agreement on what each partner is bringing and a commitment from each partner to deliver. And we're working towards that. But at this point in time, we're using the bus action plan as a demonstration of what's being delivered by all partners in the Bus Alliance to improve buses across the region. So that's a very brief summary. I'm happy to take any questions. The recommendations are just to note the updated bus action plan and to continue to work in partnership through the Bus Alliance to deliver the actions that are contained within it. And I should say Nestrans are contributing to quite a number of the actions through our budget. Thank you.
Trying to quickly check the screen, see if we've got any hands. Councillor Davidson's hand, I think, has just gone up there.
Thank you. So thanks very much for that. And because the papers are a different order from what they are in our agenda, my question was going to be, or is still really, about how this action plan fits with the net zero ambition. I'm not sure that they match up very well, and I just wondered if the two should have been considered, be reflection between these two different plans, and that they should maybe match up a bit better than they do at the moment.
I think, well, I would hope that the actions contained within the action plan support a move to net zero. Certainly, the ambition of it and its support and the ideas of supporting the objectives of the Bus Alliance to reduce the decline in bus patronage and then encourage more people back onto buses. So I think through trying to generate a mode shift away from cars onto public transport, and also the work that's being done in terms of actually making the bus fleet emission free, I would hope would contribute quite well. But there is maybe more that we can do to demonstrate that link. So I can certainly have a look at the those plans and see what we can do to strengthen that link.
Yeah, thanks very much. I do think there should be some connection, between each plan shouldn't be sitting on its own. There should be connections between probably all the different plans that Nestrans have in one way or another.
Just to come back on that, I suppose is it the bus action plan very much sits as a document underneath the wider regional transport strategy. We have a whole suite of action plans relating to rail, freight, health and transport, and the bus action plan is one of those. But yes, we can certainly make sure that that's made much clearer when we're publishing it on the website.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much for the paper, Kirsty. Can I ask, in the where there is more data, is there a column perhaps for or an existing risk register around any risks and how those might be mitigated if these plans are coming through? And my other question really is just to, in my mapping head, to think, does this action plan sits underneath the Alliance, but there would be other elements of bus travel, whether it be community transport or third sector operators that have minibuses and things like that, that would be part of the Nestrans wider picture, but maybe are not reflected in this action plan as such. So there might be other things under the regional transport strategy that would pick that up. Would I be correct in thinking that?
Yes, I would see this action plan being a reflection of the Bus Alliance partners, but absolutely the regional transport strategy in its wider sense looks very much at wider issues around demand responsive transport, access to transport in rural areas, and that broader picture. it's a tricky one, I think, because it sits within the Bus Alliance, but certainly the Bus Alliance, I think, you know, and the partners within that are always looking for those opportunities to link in and that sort of partnership working and to improve facilities that maybe smaller operators will be using, the likes of Peterhead and Fraserburgh Bus Station, for instance, are mentioned in there, and the mini interchange hubs as well, I think, with lots of benefits for the wider transport network beyond just the sort of first and stagecoach operations. And of course, Aberdeenshire Council and their Richard Mackenzie from the Public Transport Unit sits on the Bus Alliance, and obviously he's got that link into the wider work that's happening. And of course, Chris Cormack as well from the City's Public Transport Unit. So there's a connection, I think, through those teams into the highlighting, I suppose, priorities and issues into the Bus Alliance. Oh, and the risk register, yes. There are additional columns. I think risk is one of them. I would say that probably a lot of the work is the Bus Partnership Fund, and there's an awful lot in terms of risk registers associated with the Bus Partnership and those priority corridors. So I think that's probably where the biggest risks are, and those are reflected through the Bus Partnership Fund. But we can certainly make sure that's reflected for each of the actions within the plan itself.
I'm not seeing any more hands online or in the chamber, so we'll move back to the rest of the agenda in order as it's in the papers. So on that note, we'll move on to 3.1 budget matters, and I believe we've got Ella Stott online to introduce this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right, so this budget matter report provides an update on the Nestrans budget monitoring for 2022-23 and forecast outcome position. Appendix 1 details the summary position as at the end of October, showing expenditure to date of £1,172,901. Some of these projects within 22-23 budget are expected to be rolled into the next financial year, and some may be funded through other funding grants to the councils from Scottish Government. Nestrans will be able to carry forward these project fundings now that it can operate a general reserve fund. The February meeting will provide more details in the projects that will be carried forward, along with proposals for a revised 3-year capital grant programme. Appendix 2 set out a couple of firements proposed for the remaining financial year, which need to be approved by this board. This report also contains an update on projects for which Nestrans receives external funding. Nestrans has an approved budget of £40,000 in this financial year for a comprehensive travel survey. With an offer of grant for up to £50,000 match funding received from Paths for All, it is recommended that Nestrans consider allocating a further £10,000 in 23-24 to maximise the available grant. With regard to the pension discretion policy, a further extension will be requested from North East Scotland Pension Fund, as the council policy has yet to be agreed. Nestrans still intended to adopt the same positions as the council, and we will provide another update in the next board meeting. In relation to the Strategic Transport Fund, there are still currently £484,594 being retained. 16 developments are still to make a claim, and there have been no claims made in this current financial year. There are 6 recommendations for the board to approve. Note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1. Approve the environment set out in Appendix 2. Note the updates on projects for which Nestrans receives external grant funding. Agree to commit 10,000 further funding to the comprehensive travel survey in 23-24 to fully match fund the external grant available through a funding allocation from Paths for All. Note the update on the pension discretion policy, and note the Strategic Transport Fund position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any hands in. Oh, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a comment, really, or maybe a question here. I just noted in Appendix 1 that the core costs are sitting halfway through at around 58%, but I'm sure that can be it's not that far out from where it should be. But I was also looking at the income, and again, that might just be a timing issue. But the Transport Scotland and Sustrans income doesn't seem to perhaps reflect the where we are in the financial year. So it's just to ask a question around that. And I guess my third question would be around on the pensions discretions. What's the hold up, I guess, with the council policy not going through? Again, it might just be a question around timing of committee meetings and such like. But that's my 3 questions. Thanks.
I'm not sure if Ella or Jennifer Anderson can help with either of them. If not, we'd have to come back with that detail for you, Councillor MacDonald.
For the core cost, we're sitting at 58%, but actually quite a lot of them are accrued up to the end of October. So we might not have spent 58%, but that is the accrual on a monthly basis. So towards the year end, we will do adjustment and see how much we actually spend, excluding any accruals. And Jenny, you want to help out with the Sustrans?
Yes, a lot of our grants, we have to incur the expenditure first and then claim it back. So that's why we don't have the income shown yet, because we only claim it after Nestrans has incurred the expenditure. If that's the question you were asking.
That's fine. Thanks, Jenny.
I'm not seeing any more hands. Is that everything? Yep.
Yeah, it was just the third question was around the council policy, the Aberdeenshire council policy, and we can get that later.
Yeah, we've asked for an extension. Aberdeenshire haven't yet concluded on the pensions discretion. So we have said that we will follow their whatever's done for the council and submit that to NESPF. But they have responded to us saying that an extension is acceptable.
That's great. That's all I need to hear. Thank you.
On that note, can we agree the recommendations in the report? Agreed. Good. That's grand. And we'll now move on to 4.1, the director's update, and I'll pass on to the director who's sitting next to me.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.1 is the Director's Report, which gives an indication of the meetings and things we've been involved in since the last meeting of the board. Been quite a busy period, as you can see, and there's a couple that I might bring to the board's attention, if I may. I have met with CNER, the Campaign for North East Rail, on a couple of occasions, and I've met with the Just Transition Fund holders from Scottish Government about the potential for preparing a brief on exactly what we would want to look at regarding that rail reopening to Fraserburgh, Peterhead, what sort of timescales are realistic, etc. We haven't concluded that yet, and there will be a need for further meetings, and we will bring back information to board when we have a little bit more knowledge on that one. The second one I was going to mention was Strategic Transport Projects Review 2. I'm told is expected before Christmas, might even be this week. So, I was hoping that we would be able to update board, even if it was verbally on that, but I haven't seen it as yet there. The 1st of December, the Bus Alliance Board met, didn't have time to bring forward the minute before the papers were prepared for this meeting. But I think, as Mr. Dunn has already mentioned, that meeting was joined by the Director for Bus Accessibility and Active Travel from Transport Scotland. So it was really useful, I think, to see the colour of the eyes of the top people at Transport Scotland. And I got the impression she was impressed, at least by the partnership working and the progress and pace that things are moving in the northeast of Scotland. finally, I wanted to mention I've indicated that we were going to have a rail quarterly meeting this week. Because the board has been moved, we have actually shifted that. So that meeting with Transport Scotland and the rail industry will now be next week. But that was just an inaccuracy due to changing dates of the board. But happy to take any questions. But the board is there. The report is there for noting by the board. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any hands. Are we happy to agree the noting of that report? I'll take that as agreed, and we'll now move on to item 4.2, net zero carbon, and that will be Kelly Wilshire to introduce that.
Oh, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is just to give the board an update on what's happening with Nestrans and the City Council and Aberdeenshire Council and how we're working together in terms of our net zero. I won't go through all of the background because we have reported a lot of this already, and in fact at our last board in October when we did our annual climate change reporting. But as you're aware, Nestrans does its own carbon emissions each year, because we're a public body and we're obliged to report annually on our emissions, and that we're working to the Scottish Government targets to reduce our carbon emissions and become net zero by 2045. So Nestrans has a number of policies and actions, and a lot of them have been mentioned today in terms of what we're doing with the bus action plan, and there's lots of other things that we're doing, active travel action plans, and our RTS in general. Climate change, as you know, is one of the 4 main pillars. As part of the recommendations today, we are talking about Aberdeen City Council's net zero route map, and there's a mobility strategy of part of that, and our director Rab leads on the mobility strategy, and that is actually attached to this report as Appendix 1. As part of this strategy, Aberdeen City Council are also looking for organisations and businesses to make a climate change and nature pledge. And again, that is attached to this document as Appendix 2. And one of the recommendations today is for Nestrans to commit to pledge this. Nestrans are already doing or working towards everything within that pledge. For Aberdeenshire Council, they're also doing a route map for 2030. In the report here, it says they're currently preparing a route map. We've actually got an update since then, and that route map for Aberdeenshire Council's decarbonisation plans for 2030 and beyond has actually now been approved by full council, which is great. So we're recommending that the board note our responsibilities in bringing forward a plan for reducing carbon emissions. And I actually think a lot of what we've just discussed today and how our action plans can all be pulled together to show what we're doing is probably a big part of this #1 recommendation, actually pulling everything together. Number 2, endorse Nestrans collaboration in Aberdeen's commitment to net zero and committing to work with the council and partners to deliver the mobility strategy. To note the work that Aberdeenshire Council are doing with their route map to address climate change and through Climate Ready Aberdeenshire, and to approve Nestrans' formal commitment to Aberdeen Climate and Nature Pledge, which is contained in Appendix 2. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm just looking around to see if there's anyone indicating to ask questions. I'm not seeing anyone. So can I take it that the recommendations are agreed? Yeah, agreed. There we go. That's perfect. Thank you very much for that. And I'll now move on. We do the transport studies update at 5.1. Which is Paul. So I'll ask Paul in first. Thanks for an introduction on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is just a quick paper updating the board on a number of awards for studies that will be progressing, some of which are linked to the Aberdeen City Region deal. And then there's a couple which sit outside it but are complementary to the work that we're progressing through the strategy. In June, we presented a paper which talked about the 5 different areas of work we were doing on the strategic transport appraisal. And just to update on where that's at, we're continuing the strategic modelling work with the finalisation of ASAM 19. And although there's a slight delay to completing the report and audit for that, we're actually now using that for real in terms of assisting the Aberdeen Rapid Transit project. We're progressing work on looking at options on the A90 North, A952 corridor. That's Ellen, Peterhead and Fraserburgh. And a tender's just recently been issued to consultants and in the process of being awarded to consultants looking at the evidence review and gap analysis on that corridor, linked to the importance of that route for freight movements, strategic connectivity as well. The work on Wellington Road, that is still being scoped with colleagues in the City Council, although that fits very much with their accelerated work they're doing on the external links to Aberdeen South Harbour. The key focus there is on those 2 key junctions at Hareness and Sooterhead. Work has been commissioned on rail freight demand and options, really looking quite hard about how these improvements to the rail service south of Aberdeen and the improvements to rail freight capacity then have a flip onto rail freight terminal needs, but also that wider demand for rail freight in the region. There's also an opportunity to consider how that ties up with a hydrogen opportunity due to the adjacency of the energy transition zone. We're also progressing some work on mobility hubs and separately to the rail freight work, hydrogen refuelers, seeing if we can develop scopes or designs for hydrogen refueling facilities beyond Aberdeen City and into Aberdeenshire. And that has the most usefulness for the freight network, where we see the next real rollout of hydrogen vehicles coming and of importance to this region as well. So that's the work that's been undertaken within the envelope of the City Region deal. 2 other strategic pieces of work that we're doing at the moment as well. We're looking at the regional implications of a national 20% vehicle kilometre traffic reduction target, which comes through the Transport Scotland. It's an important component of their climate strategy. However, it's important that we look at it in the North East context and work out how that best could be achieved, what mitigations might be appropriate, or what other supporting considerations are also necessary for that. So we are looking at different options around about that one as well. Fortunately, we're aided by our new graduate, Adam, who'd studied some of these issues when he was doing his MSc at Aberdeen City Council, Aberdeen University. The other element of work we've just commissioned is a comprehensive travel survey, again looking at methodologies for undertaking comprehensive travel on a multimodal basis across the Nestrans area, helping to baseline the transport strategy, but also provide a framework for future monitoring as well. And again, tender assessment has been undertaken and we've been able to award that work recently. So the recommendations of the board note the progress being made on the strategic transport elements of the City Region deal. Note the award of tender for the regional implications of 20% vehicle target, and also note the pending award of work on a comprehensive travel survey for the Nestrans area. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. And again, I'm just having a look around for any hands in the chamber online. In lieu of any questions, are we happy to agree the recommendations from the report? Yep. I'll take that as agreed, and we'll now move on to item 6.2, the Health and Transport Action Plan update and annual report, and that'll be Andrew Stewart will be giving us the introduction to that.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleased to introduce the report before the board. It asks the Nestrans Board to approve for their part the HTAP annual report. The document was approved last week by the HTAP steering group, and it'll be reformatted into a sort of designed version and provided to all of the partners, distributed to the 3 community planning partnership boards, and published online for sort of wider consumption. We also share it with the Mobility and Access Committee for Scotland, who have a representative who sits on the HTAP steering group, and with Public Health Scotland and Transport Scotland. So the report covers the financial year 21 to 22. As you'll know, the programme sets out to provide strategic added value to the work of partner organisations across issues where transport impacts on health, and the issue of people's access to health and social care, the availability and affordability and accessibility of transport for those journeys. So there's been good, strong, ongoing participation from the many diverse stakeholders and partners around the programme. We continue to support successfully our projects such as Think, which continues to give most vulnerable people the best information available for planning their journeys to health and social care appointments. And the branch project from it, Think in the City, which is still funded each year by the City Health and Social Care Partnership and provides 2 dedicated wheelchair accessible vehicles provided by a community transport operator to dedicated for health and social care journeys in the city, which remains very popular and fully utilised. The report also sets out the ongoing good links that we established through the HTAP programme with leading national academics on transport and on public health specifically, but we've had various guest speakers kindly come and speak to local partners in Grampian on to build the understanding within transport colleagues of why health inequalities filter through the system and what the methods used in public health to make the case for transport interventions. And we have also, through the programme, maintained sort of ongoing public health input to initiatives such as the Road Safety Casualty Reduction Group, Get About, and in the Low Emission Zone Group. The programme also manages to help facilitate sort of the connections between things like the corridor studies and other active travel projects, so that where relevant, NHS Grampian and others can contribute. We maintain an ongoing dialogue with community transport in Grampian because of the key role that they play in helping people get to appointments and other services, and also managing sort of national outreach work to highlight the programme in Grampian. We've got good links with Public Health Scotland, Nestrans, Scottish Government, and as I said, the Mobility and Access Committee for Scotland. We also have the Director of the Community Transport Association in Scotland sitting on the HTAP steering group. This year we've brought people to the area to speak about pieces of work done around transport poverty, the impacts of the cost of living crisis, and how that filters through the transport system around people's anxieties of future bus services, etc. Just the sort of questions of uncertainty for people in difficult situations who don't own their own private transport. Going forward, we're undertaking a review of the HTAP document. It was last reviewed in 2013. There's been a lot of development since then, and the steering group's overseeing a review group, which has met 3 times to plan the review process. Since the document was last reviewed, we've obviously had the creation of health and social care partnerships, the COVID pandemic and recovery, evidence showing a decline in life expectancy since 2012 in all parts of the UK, acceleration in using online appointments, the climate change emergency being declared, the creation of Public Health Scotland, the new national and regional transport strategies, consultation around a national care service, and the global energy and cost of living crisis that's ongoing. So There are a lot of things for people to discuss in the workshops, which will be taking place in the new year, and be very pleased to see any of the boards at the workshops. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. I'm just, I think Councillor MacDonald has a question.
Perhaps more a comment, Chair, because it is really good to see our non-emergency patient transport services report and doing well, because I think it wouldn't take much to say some of our emergency services are really struggling. So it's been really good to see this this report and to hear the positive things that have been happening around HTAP and the services that feed into it.
Thank you. I think that it's no surprise probably that all parts of health and transport are under pressure, and I think what you say about the non-emergency transport and highlighting how important volunteers in community transport is just, I mean, this is tomorrow we're actually holding the presentation of the 5th Grampian Volunteer Transport Awards to try and show those groups that what they're doing is appreciated, but they are a sector who have struggled in the past few years because of limited fundraising opportunities, and also the health impacts of the pandemic have filtered through to their own staff and volunteers, and things like the cost of fuels making it difficult for them to recruit new volunteer drivers. So there's things to discuss in the future about how we support that sector going forward.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so can I take that report as agreed? Good, thank you very much. And we'll now move on to 7, the progress report. Do we have any questions on the items? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. Just one small one, really. On page 81, and the really coming back to the Bus Alliance and so on, it says only a single quote was returned for our Get About videos. I was quite surprised to read that, given that I thought with the, with TikTok and all these other things going on, that there would be lots of companies out there that would be willing to do that. So maybe it's just to get a little bit more detail around why we think that is.
Yeah, I think we were a little surprised, disappointed as well. I suspect the timing, the timing of it probably was a factor. I think we had hoped that we might be able to get something in before Christmas, and I think that was probably just maybe pushing it a little bit too tight. So I think that maybe had a factor. We've had a discussion with them, and we will go back to the Bus Alliance and see how we can perhaps reframe it and put something out, so we can still do something. So it's still very much on the agenda. We just a bit of a bump, unfortunately.
I'm not seeing any more hands. There's no recommendations as such for this, I don't think. So I think it's just a case of moving on to publications and consultations. Is that John? From John Barron. Can we get an introduction for this, please?
Thank you, Chair. It will come as no surprise to some of you that I could be here speaking for some time about the first document, the cycling framework. Suffice to say, despite its currently clunky title, it's a hugely important document. It will replace the Cycling Action Plan for Scotland, and it sits below the Active Travel Framework, which brings together the key policy approaches for improving the uptake of walking and cycling in Scotland for travel. The Cycling Action Plan for Scotland, members may be aware, had 3 iterations which run from 2010 to 2020. I'm hoping that members will have had a chance to study our suggested response, which is a collective effort. Thank you, Adam and Kelly. There's a lot in our replies to the 25 questions. Many are fairly critical, but in addition to making a number of points in where we consider the draft needs a bit more work to fully meet the many issues that it needs to address, there are some positives in there too. It is our view that the long overdue mention of potential for both multi-year funding aspects and for capital and revenue funding to be more equitably divided are very welcome. Other main points which we've highlighted are that, as we've seen in recent years, whilst more money coming from the centre is of course welcome towards active travel, what is also needed is a lot more wraparound and support at the local and regional end of things to enable these projects to be delivered. Also in this section, we've highlighted for members 2 regional transport strategies, one from Sestran and the other from SPT, a draft and a final draft. They're there for information, and as members would expect, they very much reflect the national lead and how best both RTPs think this can best be delivered across their respective areas. And lastly, we've added a stagecoach modal shift survey, which was mentioned, I think, at a recent bus partnership meeting. I will do my best to answer any questions that anyone may have on our draft response to the cycling framework document, and in the meantime it's recommended that the board note the publication of this document and approve a draft response, and note the publication of the other RTPs regional transport strategies, and note the findings from the stagecoach report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm just having a look around for any hands. I'm not seeing any, so can I take that report? And that's can I take that as agreed, or are folk happy with that? Yep. In that case, thank you very much, and we'll move on now to the information bulletin. So I'll go to Kelly Wilkes just for an introduction. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This report is just to provide information and updates for the board on a number of matters that don't require any decisions. We have a summary of all the press inquiries, media releases and media coverage relevant to Nestrans in Appendix 1 of this report. We've also used this information bulletin as an opportunity to give board members an update on what we're doing through our Get About sustainable travel brand. At the moment, the Get About partnership is focusing and working with the North East Scotland Road Safety Partnership on Be Bright at Night, which is a campaign that is continuing on radio. We have digital advertising on the Press and Journal and on billboards and bus shelters across Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. The campaign is aimed at raising awareness of the need to wear bright and reflective clothing if out at night, and for drivers to be more aware of vulnerable road users and adapt their driving to the conditions. There's a couple of photographs there, which are just some examples of the digital bus shelters that we have, which I think are actually really quite good, and also shows you the 2 different adverts. We've got one focused at drivers and one focused at vulnerable road users. I also thought it would be a good opportunity to give you an update on the Aberdeen City Bike Hire Scheme. As you'll be aware, this e-bike dockless scheme was launched last month on the 9th of November, so just under a month ago. Users need to download the Big Issue e-bikes app on their smartphone. We've got a picture here of some of the bikes outside the Arts Centre. I've done a couple of screenshots that you'll see from the app. The parking areas, these are the locations where you can pick up or drop off a bike. Now, at the moment, let me check my notes, we have 31 bike stations, but we are looking to add that number to another 10 or 15 locations around the city where people are actually able to access bikes. There's a little bit there about how you can find a bike and how it works. And I was in a meeting with operators, Big Issue Bike this morning, and so far, so as I say, we're less than a month in, there's been 1,243 users registered for the scheme, and there's been 1,823 completed rides in Aberdeen. So I think considering it was launched in November, that's not actually too bad. I also wanted to update the board on the bike recycling scheme, the North East Cycle Hub. We have reported to board previously that Nestrans had been successful in receiving some extra funding from Transport Scotland for active travel projects, one of which is a bike recycling scheme. This project has now progressed, and we have Gordon Rural Action, Stella's Voice and the Angus and Dundee Cycle Hub on board as partners to deliver this project. We have now given some grant funding to these organisations so they can go off and actually start implementing the project. The concept is that these organisations will upcycle donated cycles. Now, these cycles can be donated from members of the public, or they can be taken hopefully eventually to the recycling centres across both the city and the Shire, and we'll be able to upcycle bikes via the recycling centres as well. The idea is that we'll have bike mechanics who will then triage the donated cycles, take off parts for ones that can't be upcycled, and then upcycle others. These bikes will then either be sold on at a reduced cost or given free via a referral system, along with the helmet, lock and lights and an information pack to those who can't afford a bike. There are currently 2 development officers in post via the Angus and Dundee Cycle Hub, and these officers' roles are very much to set up agreements with additional partners, such as local authorities and other third sector organisations, in order to receive these donated cycles and upcycle them and get them out to various people who need them. But as I say, it's still very early days, but we do have people on board now and things are happening, and we'll keep the board updated with progress as the project develops. So the recommendation from this report is just the board note the contents, but I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm not seeing any hands, so I might just ask a quick question myself on this bike hire scheme. I know one of the comments that's been made about it is the pricing of that. Is that something that's likely to be reviewed at some point going forward, or is that likely to stay as is? Do you know?
As far as I'm aware, the pay-as-you-go fund pricing system, which is the current pricing system, is going to carry on the way it is. They are looking at having a subscription option coming forward into the new year, and they're also looking at potential sort of package deals for gifts and things over the Christmas period. So they are looking at different pricing options moving forward, but I think the pay-as-you-go system is certainly the model that they're looking at the moment.
Thank you very much for that. And I see a hand from Colin Alanak if he wants to come in.
Yeah, again, it's just about the hair bikes. I haven't actually used one myself, and I was wondering if any of the councillors or the officers have used it and what their experience was of it.
I'm not sure about any of the councillors, but I know my colleague John has hired one this week, so I don't know if John can update the board.
Excellent, first class, and really good, all positive. The one I picked up was in the Duthie Park, just beside the flagpole. For those that know it, it's just beside the top of a hill, obviously. So as soon as I picked it up, it's got e-assist. You can easily get, even my old legs could carry me to the top of that hill very easily. So yeah, very positive.
I couldn't comment from the other councillors. I've not had a chance to use it yet. I've got my own bike. If it helps, I tend to find that using my own one is cheaper than hiring another. But I don't know if any other councillors or that want to come in. I see Councillor MacDonald picking.
Yeah, I personally haven't used it yet, but I am hearing good things about it in terms of that. I think you have to get used to the app and knowing when to actually activate it and so on. But certainly, somebody I know has used it from one end of the Union Street to the other and found it, useful for that, just to get to from one place to another, and the cost was comparable. He's maybe he's 28, so he's not getting the under 22s and concessions. So for him, it was cheaper than actually going on the bus. So it was good. So I've heard lots of positives about it. There have been glitches, let's be honest, but I think overall, what we've seen is a scheme that looks like it may well work. So I've certainly got my fingers crossed. I too have a bike in the townhouse that I use in the city centre. But yeah, we're going to have a go at it soon. So I'll let you know.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll pass on to Rob Dixon to take us through the conferences and presentations.
Thank you, Chair. Conferences and presentations is a report we bring to every board meeting, just so you know what we've been up to and where we've been. There haven't been an awful lot in recent weeks, but they are included as Appendix 1. So the report's really just for noting. Thank you.
We're happy to note that. Yep. Final item is pending business and reports for future meetings, and I'll pass back over to Rob Dixon.
Thanks, Chair. Again, a standing item that we bring to every meeting, a number of reports which we hope to bring back to an early meeting next year. Pensions discretion we've spoken about. I'd like to bring forward some update on Strategic Transport Fund. We have said we will do something on park and ride, and we've done some initial monitoring of the park and ride sites as a start for that work. ART appraisal outcomes, as I say, we've got consultants reporting to us early in the new year, and we will bring forward reports when we can, hopefully something to the February board. Multimodal corridor studies, similarly, work ongoing on the key corridors, and we would hope to bring that forward early next year. And also working on an active travel action plan, which we intend to do some work on and bring forward reports. So reports there for noting, and for the opportunity for members to add anything that they feel we should be bringing to your attention if there's anything that we can support you with. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Just a thought. A few of us went out fairly recently to have a very informative and feet on the ground visit to the new harbour at Aberdeen South. We met and jumped on a bus and got taken down and went round the new quays, which was was really an interesting trip, and heard what was happening there. And in fact, there were a couple of ships moored up that were using it. And I just wondered if there was anything that might be helpful for us to understand as Nestrans around the transport links from that harbour, not about the city region deal stuff with the road, but more about how, because the cruise ships are going to be here before we know it. It's next May or whenever, so it'd be useful to know what the vision is, whether it's Visit Scotland or whatever, about cruise ship users getting on and off to get to the city or into the Shire, but also anything around that I think would be helpful in terms of the transport links from there. And I suppose secondly, we at the Finance and Resources Committee, there has, as we know, been no announcements yet, but it is going to be very imminent, the announcements on the Green Port. So, and I'm sure that'll be reflected just in our normal papers. But it was just to say that at that meeting, it was said that it should be in the next couple of weeks. But then we've been hearing that for a while. So, but I think it does feel like it's going to be fairly imminent that we hear about that.
Chair, I think that sounds like the sort of report we could pull things together. Paul has been doing some work through the City Region deal, including around the Green Port and the Energy Transition Zone, and maybe a wider report. I think we've also committed to doing something on freight. So I think there's certainly a piece of work that we could bring forward in and around that area. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. I might chip in with a suggestion myself. Just we've had a few that was touched upon in the presentation earlier as well about the multi-operator ticketing. I was just wondering if it might be possible to maybe get a report on that at future as well, just to progress on that and how we can maybe see that, where we might see something something being fully delivered, or where we are and what we could expect to maybe see in coming forward. If folk would be happy with that as well.
Yep, we can add that to the list. So thank you.
And I'm not seeing any other hands. So on that note, are we happy to note the report otherwise? And not happy. On that note, then I'll take that as agreed. And with that being the last report, I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.